Discussion on Discussions Part 2. In this video, we'll look at the expectations of posting on the discussion board. What is an outstanding post? The discussion board rubric mentions the criteria in which the forums will be graded. You can find this rubric on the syllabus, but it may be useful to review the rubric here. So the criteria are critical thinking, connections, creativity, timeliness, stylistics, and contribution to the learning community. Of course, our goal should be using the discussion board as a means of learning and inquiry, not simply a way to gather points in the class. Outstanding posts, as the rubric points out, contain particular qualities. Yes, adhering to the 200 to 250 word limit is a good place to start, as the syllabus mentions, but it's also important to follow the writing prompt, responding to the questions and following the guidelines that note how you can organize your thoughts in your main post. And perhaps the most important point of all, posting on time is crucial for a successful experience on the discussion forum. After all, the discussion board is the place where we will work together to make meaning and understand the texts and course concepts on a deep level. So if we post after the deadline, our peers will not read our posts or replies, which defeats the purpose of a discussion board. Note the deadlines of the posts and replies. Also keep in mind that a discussion forum will be closed within 24 hours of the deadline to reply to a peer. If you're confused about the deadline, please contact me as soon as possible. You can reach me via email, or you can post your questions in the class questions forum, and I'll reply back to you in that forum. Let's examine this annotated sample discussion forum and post to better understand the expectations of the discussion board. Here's the writing prompt. After viewing the video on good reading techniques, respond to the question, how do you read literature? Describe your reading preferences, strategies, and techniques. Would you say that you are a good or active critical reader? What good reading techniques do you already use? What good reading techniques would you like to try this semester? Now here's the sample post. Every reader reads literature in their own way. I personally read literature in numerous ways. Depending on the type of literature I'm reading, I opt for different reading strategies. If I am reading literature to study, I tend to highlight, reread, and make real-life connections to have that literature stick with me. While if I am reading for pleasure, I may use post-it notes, look up words I don't know the meaning of, and try to use them in a sentence correctly. I also have an application on my phone that sends me a daily word every day. The application is called Word Genius. My personal reading preference is suspense, romance, and fantasy. Many times I like to read fantasy to escape the real world. While I read fantasy, I consider myself to have a wide imagination which works in my favor many times. While I am reading, no matter the genre, I always try to relate to the text, even in the slightest form. I feel this is one of my best techniques that I use. When I find myself in a situation that I cannot relate, I try to picture how I would have felt being in the situation setting. A reading technique that I will like to use this semester is to ask more questions to the text while reading and talk back to the text. Another technique I would like to try is having prior knowledge about the author. I would like to see if learning about the author helps me understand more the author's writing piece. So in the sample post, I use different colors to highlight the questions that the writer answered. So for example, I used yellow to indicate that the writer answered the question, describe your reading preferences, strategies, and techniques. And then I use that kind of turquoise color to indicate where the writer answered the question, would you say that you are a good or active critical reader? And then I use a kind of darker, a greenish blue to indicate where the writer answers the question, what good reading techniques do you already use? And then I use that silver color to indicate where exactly the writer responded to the question, what good reading techniques would you like to try this semester? So as you can see in the sample post, the writer explores all of the questions posed in the prompt while exceeding the 200 to 250 word limit of a discussion board main post. By exploring all of the questions and exceeding the word limit, the writer thinks critically about the topic and shares important reading techniques and strategies with peers. What is an outstanding reply? When replying to a peer, it may be tempting to simply agree with your peer's comments, such as, "Yes, I saw that in the reading too." Or it may be tempting to provide encouraging words. "Wow, that's a great post." While providing words of support and encouragement are most certainly welcome on the discussion board, it may also be useful to consider the overall purpose of the discussion board as a means of inquiry and learning. So offering words of support and encouragement should also be followed by a continuation of the discussion or an explanation for your reply, such as, "Yes, I saw that in the reading too, and now that I know more than one reader has the same interpretation, I'm confident that this interpretation is solid." Or, "Wow, that's a great post because you helped me to see the reading in a new light. I thought there was only one way to interpret the character's ambivalence, but your interpretation helps me to understand why the character doesn't kill his uncle at the beginning of the play." You may also consider replying to your peers by offering an alternative yet valid response. "I appreciated your response and found it very thought-provoking. I noticed that you used the Smithson reading in your argument. I read that article as well and came to a similar but slightly different conclusion." Or you can suggest a possible adjustment to your peer's response and share why you are suggesting the change. For example, "I appreciate your response and wonder if it might be helpful to add a visual representation of the data to help the reader better understand your explanation." Or you can provide an additional resource or information that supports your peer's posts. "I was really excited to read that you based your response on a reading from Sandra Cisneros. She's one of my favorite authors. Have you read Bad Boys? I think it would give some additional insight for you to consider." You can also share an idea that you think might improve your peer's response. For example, "Your response was interesting and it made me go back to the text to reread the passage you referenced. I wonder if you would consider adding your own interpretation of this passage based on your experience. I'd love to read more about it." Or you can ask a question to gain clarity. "I am wondering about the very last section of your post. It seems that you are referring to a personal experience that you had, but it wasn't clear to me. Could you please clarify?" Or you can ask a question that helps your peer expand on his or her idea. For example, "You shared some really interesting research you found regarding this topic. I'm wondering if it might be worthwhile to add your thoughts about how the recent laws regarding health insurance might impact your stance." Or you can play devil's advocate. Even if you do not necessarily agree with an alternate position, for the sake of debate or to explore the topic further, post that alternative viewpoint to your peer. "Interesting post. Have you considered looking at it from this viewpoint? How might you defend your position?" Also, it's important to note that each prompt contains special guidelines for replying to your peers. Following these guidelines will help you to advance the discussion and interact with your peers in an engaging and respectful way. Getting started. So, now that we have discussed the role of the discussion board in our learning experience and examined sample posts and replies to get a better understanding of the discussion board expectations, we're ready to post. Go to the menu on our course's Blackboard page and click on Discussion Board. Then find Mini English Autobiography, read the prompt, and start posting. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing you on the discussion board.